and this one's you, Sina. Take it away.
Right. So I just wanted to push an update here regarding the recent discussion on this copy encryption. So we had a discussion about multipart, and I just added some more tests to cover the multipart scenario when we're copying a part from an encrypted object. I also did some fixing. I mean, it was not that big fix, but just more compatibility fixes to my PR, so it could also be passing the test. So just was an update, and then in case if we want to align on something else, but that should be the whole thing for encryption copying, I guess. And there's also a child PR regarding the replication cross-bucket one that we discussed also, that this is also ready if we agree on doing decryption on the source and then encryption on destination. But if you want to do the decryption and encryption on the destination itself at the same time, then that needs to be on hold until one of the PRs for copy encryption get merged, so we can utilize those pipes to do decryption and encryption for that one as well. It was just an updating. If any comments, we're happy to discuss.
Okay, I haven't had a chance to review the replication stuff in detail. I think it would be better to prioritize just getting the copy cases working. Where do we stand on Marcus's PR? I think we did some testing and encountered some test failures.
Yeah, I just took a look at the PR. It looks like you posted some failing tests. I don't yet have any idea what was happening.
Okay, my understanding is that it's several response headers that are missing from copy requests. I guess that those just weren't tested before.
Yeah, no, I do remember going through discovering that the attributes that get returned when you do a copy object, or the attributes that get copied over to the new object, there was a bad story about that. There's documentation. The AWS documentation leads you to think that all of the attributes got copied over unchanged, but it turns out that there's really only a severe subset that should get preserved, and many attributes should not get copied. And so I went to some work to try to make sure that happened. I don't know if these test results are a consequence of that, or there's something else happening.
The test failures that are happening at the moment are regarding just not reflecting the right HTTP responses regarding the encryption that the client is asking for. For example, if you're asking for a SSEC encryption, then the header you should get as a response should be the MD5 blah blah. So it's kind of like a response. The line that I mentioned also in your code.
Yeah, no, that sounds reasonable. I'm just
exactly.
Yeah.
So that should be it. I guess the attribute should be there in the objects, just not reflected to the HTTP response to those.
Yeah, when I was doing my testing, I certainly paid a lot more attention to what ended up on the object after it was copied.
Yeah, so that should be only maybe what I left to continue the testing. I mean, I'm not sure about the multipart tests that I've had. If your PR is also happy with that, but we can drop the multipart if you think that we just want to prioritize that one. But the fixes are easy. You can check my commits for my PR. It's just again reflecting some headers on honoring some verification on encryption headers. So yeah, that was.
Well, I can certainly take a look into these test results and see what's happening. And I certainly think that would be appropriate to run my stuff through the multi-site testing.
The multi-part test cases, right?
Yeah, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Sina, is that just an update to your existing S3 test PR? I can reschedule pointing at that.
Yes, it's additional commits.
Okay, yeah, I'll start another test today.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on copy object? All right, let's move on. Yuval is next. Revisit EC pool issue with bucket logging.
Yes. So yeah, we discussed this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And I just wanted to kind of flush what exactly am I suggesting to do? First question is, I mean, the first thing I'm going to do is just put documentation saying, make sure that the buckets that you use for logs are on a non-EC pool, if possible. So that's going to be a simple fix to the issue. If for some reason this is not possible, then there's one thing that I'm kind of hesitant to suggest, and this is to suggest running the command that allows appending to this pool, to the EC pool. The main reason is that it looks like a simple solution, but in fact, it's going to be a read, modify, write every time I add another row to the log object, which is going to have really bad performance. So first question to this forum here is whether I should even suggest that, or suggest that with a warning, or just not do that at all. Because it's a simple fix to the problem, but not a good one.
I mean, if we're planning to fix this, then I don't think that we should suggest people get into a bad configuration like this that we don't really want to support.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest them that they would use a non-EC pool for the log bucket, because I don't see any problem here. But I'm not going to suggest a specific command that kind of hides the problem. Okay, so going to the actual solution, Casey, as you suggested that I would look into the extra data pool that we're using for incomplete multi-part uploads. Now, my question here, so sure, I can use this pool, but my question here is different. So is this considered a temporary pool, or pool for temporary objects? So my question is, like, should I use this pool as a temporary place to hold the objects, and then when they're committed or done, or I'm done with the objects, just perform the actual copy into the pool of the bucket? So because currently when I'm committing the object, I'm not copying anything. I'm just creating a head object and connecting them. So an option would be to do the actual copying, or is this pool could be large enough to actually hold the log objects even after being committed, and just do the commit just like I do now, and it's just that the head object and the tail object be on different pools, so I don't see, which should be okay. But this is only if this pool can grow to accommodate all the logs of the system, which I'm not sure this is the case.
Yeah, I certainly think it would be better to leave the objects there once we write them instead of copying and deleting. From RGW's perspective, this pool is always around. I think we
No,
create it with the same PG arguments that we do other pools. And I think the hope is that the autoscaler would size it correctly based on what we put there. But I don't know that everybody's using the autoscaler.
Yeah, because I mean, my question is, so I understand that I can assume the pool is there. So this is great. But the question is, do we currently use it for something that can just grow, or do we currently use it only for as a temporary holding place for stuff?
I want to say that incomplete multi-part tracking is the only current use for it, but I'm not positive.
So yeah, so we can have a problem because, I mean, let's say that the pool cannot accommodate all the logs. So if currently it is used for something that already needs lots of space because it's kind of grows with the system, then I'm not concerned because it's like there's a different reason for why this pool has to be large enough. But if it is used for incomplete multiparts, which in a regular system doesn't grow indefinitely, then it could be that the size is not enough, and we'll never see a problem until I'm going to fill this pool with logs, and then we will see the problem.
So I don't think that the actual size would be an issue unless somebody's putting a quota on the pool directly. I think it would just be an issue of PG counts being large enough for the number of objects in it. And that's why I mentioned the autoscaler. But in general, like you create multiple pools and the actual storage capacity isn't really limited to one pool or another. Does that make sense?
Okay, I think so. Regarding the object count, I am using, I mean, it depends but potentially I'm using quite big Redis objects for logs. So maybe the object count, but again, I don't know. It could be that people would use logs for many things. It could be that they'll be committing them often, so the object will be small and many. So
for the autoscaler, I think the decision is based on size rather than object count. So I think that's still okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess I'll just use this pool, or I can check the main pool of the bucket to see if the main pool of the bucket is an EC pool. Then I'm just gonna switch to the other one and not use copying. Just do the bucket index update and the creation of the head object, and that's it.
I have a question in this regard, actually. I mean, usually if those non-EC pools that we use for multi-part metadatas are usually hosted on fast, disk and VMEs because they don't actually store much, but they just do lots of IOs. And if we start to actually storing more data, persist data actually, then a dedicated capacity management needs to be done on a fast NVMEs, which would be probably expensive to the business if probably we're gonna do that because the other pool is EC and then logging cannot happen there. Perhaps if we could make this one like a dedicated configuration, like in a placement rule that the admin can specify a dedicated pool for that, then the guy could be able to create a pool on even the slow disks, HDD, whatsoever it's gonna be, but just replicate it to also host these permanent datas in a larger scale, class pool rather than I mean, by pool, I mean a set of servers or this whatsoever, rather than something that's mostly used for IOs. And if we start to storing bytes in it, it's probably going to be expensive for just storing logs in long run, perhaps.
Yeah, I think this is a good suggestion, but I'm wondering, is this going to be like where this configuration is going to be set? Is this going to be part of the log bucket configuration, or?
I guess it should be similar to what we have as a default placement, that we define the data pool, index pool, stuff like that. Then probably we can introduce one like lock pool. I mean, lock probably has already been used, something, uh, different, but should be a good place perhaps.
Okay, so just one. I mean, so I guess similar to the this extra data pool that is used for, but just create just yet another one. I can call it bucket logging pool.
Do people usually have special requirements for this data extra pool? Does anybody else know of users putting that on especially fast media? But I think I get Sina's point that it should be configurable. Maybe right, maybe we add an extra field alongside the data extra pool configuration specifically for this, but default to just using a different namespace of the same pool, so that we wouldn't be expanding the number of pools by default unless somebody wants to configure it specially.
Okay, I'm kind of thinking again. Maybe maybe copying is going to be the simpler approach, because I mean, somebody put this log bucket somewhere and they know that this is the right place for it. And instead of adding a new pool, a new configuration, which is we can just trust what they do. I mean, the fact that we use append in order to update this log object is internal implementation detail that they don't really care about that. From their perspective, those logs could just be on an EC pool, and this is fine. I mean, if those are large objects and they want to save space and so on and so forth, they could have their reasons for that.
I'm not as sold on falling back to this position, I guess, after all the discussion. Somebody might want it, but I wouldn't choose it by default.
I'm just thinking like suppose that you're just paying for some company's S3 storage hosting. You don't necessarily know what backend storage is available to your buckets, whether it's erasure coding or not.
And again, I mean, somebody created a log pool. I mean, all of those operations, like create the log pools, everything is explicit. You create a log pool. Sorry, you create a log bucket, and if for some reason you decided this needs to be in a specific pool that has happened to be erasure coded, then this is what you want. Well, the fact that we append to the object row by row, I mean, why would you care about that? You said where your log bucket should be, and maybe we should just honor that at the cost that when we're committing, we're just doing another copy.
Well, if that's expensive and not actually desirable, then we should advise them not to shoot their foot off.
Yeah, so this is why I said the first thing I'm going to do is put a comment in the documentation saying, please put your log bucket on a non-EC pool. But okay, but maybe they think differently.
Well, I don't really object to that, but I think what Casey was getting at was the default behavior being safe.
To me, I think the important part is that just normal API requests that generate logs are performant. And so I think first of all, avoiding the EC overwrites is important there. And also if we're doing commits from these API requests, we should avoid extra copies that would add latency to the API requests.
Okay, I see. Yes. Okay, right. Because the commit could be from the specific commit command, and then we don't really care about how long it takes. But it could also be an outcome of just a regular operation that happens to hit the log object when it needs to be committed, and then it will be added to the latency there.
Well, I certainly agree with Casey anyway. So that's different from what I interpreted it, but I think that's fine.
Okay, so I will allow extra configuration or default to the extra data pool if this extra configuration doesn't exist. And then we create a separate namespace in that pool just for the bucket logging stuff.
Okay. If you have questions about where that new variable goes, I'm happy to point you at code.
Okay, yeah, I'll probably just copy and paste from the multitude of other pools that we have. Thanks.
Well, it's not the same as the zone pools that you've added before. It's part of the placement configuration, the data pool and the data extra pool.
Okay.
So it's a similar pattern, but a different struct.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
This is something that we're shipping for Tentacle, though. Are we maybe missing some docs that should be with the release?
I mean, what we have in bucket logging in Tentacle is pretty basic. I haven't started backporting all the work. There are many other things on top of this one that needs to go there. I'm not sure what is a Tentacle timeline.
There's pressure to cut the first release candidate in the next week or two.
Then it would probably be in a minor release.
So have we had any discussion about whether bucket logging is supported or experimental, or are we just saying that we're going to support what's there?
We didn't have this discussion. Maybe we should have. I can. I mean, I can show the list of things that needs to be backported to Tentacle, and we can decide whether without them we have something which is good enough, or maybe not, or maybe we need to expedite this backporting. I can set up a meeting for that.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, if we make changes to where these log objects are stored, then if a customer is already using this, I guess we would need to add some extra logic to recognize the changes. I would prefer to avoid that complexity.
I guess if if somebody is not using an EC pool for the bucket, I'm not going to change anything, and then nothing's going to change. If someone is using an EC pool for the bucket currently, then bucket logging is constantly failing for them. It doesn't work unless they hacked it with this special command. I'm not sure. So there could be a case where they're actually doing that. But overall, if somebody is doing that, if somebody is using an EC pool and trying to use bucket logging, and the log bucket is on an EC pool, then bucket logging will be not functional at all.
I think there's still an issue with the existing replicated pool stuff though, because you're just appending to an object that's already visible in the namespace, right? The head object.
No, I'm appending to a tail object. It's not visible it's not visible in the bucket.
Is it so you're appending to a tail object, and then commit is creating a head object with a manifest that points at those?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, then yeah, the changes for EC extra data should be very simple if you're already doing the manifest stuff.
Okay.
Okay, do you think we still need a separate meeting, or are we just agreed that we'll add EC support as a follow-up?
Yeah, I think we can add EC support as a follow-up, especially that most likely if somebody is doing that, it just doesn't work for them. So there's no problem of backward compatibility when something doesn't work. There's another set of things that needs to go to Tentacle, but again, I think it can go in a minor update.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
Any other thoughts here? Last call for new agenda topics then.
Actually, I had a question about one of the live processing or LC thing that we have in place. Maybe it might be easier to share the screen and talk about that code. Can I share the screen and talk about that?
Please do.
Thank you. Okay. So you guys can see this. So let me see the back the code. Actually, this is regarding the expired session. So they're giving a background here. So way the LC works is each shard gets picked up, and we basically mark that the status to LC processing so that the other guy doesn't come in, like the other LC worker or thread or the other RGW doesn't pick up and runs or picks this thread up, picks that same bucket. What's happening in our case is when the RGW is slow or the backend Rados is slow, right? A lot of what happens is this lock is not released. So this lock, actually, if you look down here, bucket, this guy is calls the LC process. Once this lock finishes, we go and set the entry to. Oops, sorry, I misplaced somewhere. My bad. One, yeah, the lock lambda here. It tries to acquire this lock, and if this lock cannot, sorry, actually, my bad. I didn't. I was just start. Yeah. Um, says processing update head. Already set entry. Actually, I wanted to go back. Process RM entry. Sorry. Okay, yeah. This status. We get this only if we get the lock here. Basically, what we are trying to do is once the LC is processed for that particular bucket, so first we get the lock here actually before we say we try to first this. Oh man, I'm not doing the right. Okay, yeah, this is a lock. We try to get the lock saying that I'm going to process this bucket, and once that lock, I get this bucket, I set the entry to processing. Uh, yeah, I mark the status to processing, and I leave once that bucket is processed. Again, I try to acquire the lock, and then based on whatever the LC status was, I update go and update the status, which is either failed or complete. Right. What's happening in our case is uh, this guy is timing out because the backend is slow. It is not able to get. This is the Rados lock that it tries to get because the Rados is slow at the back end, the lock cannot be acquired, and because of that, the status is always set is still set to LC processing here. It is not either not one of these, right? Now comes after 24 hours, the LC again gets kicked in. So there already is a logic which says, hey, is the lock if entry status is already line 2403, it says it's processing. Okay, let's verify whether this is an expired session, right? In the expired session, which makes sense, what we do is we try to get number of seconds in a day. So basically assuming that it started at 000 hours, the next day would have that many number of seconds. But what we do is we do 2 into interval here. So what's happening is it's assuming that it's waiting for 2 days. So what happens is when the next day when the LC kicks in, because the LC shard was set to processing, it goes and says whether it's expired, even though it had started previous day. We multiply line number we say it is 2 into interval. So we are assuming that we are countering for 2 days here and not 1 day actually. So the LC doesn't get processed for that particular day for that bucket, even though it was just because it was set to processing and Rados did not release a lock, so it is still in the processing.
I see.
Yeah. So now comes the third day. I'm not finished here actually. What happens is a lot of times the LC is actually this less than equal to also is a problem here. What happens is even on the third day, this less than is not often getting set. It is either less than or equal to, because think about this. You took a lock at 00 on a Monday. It comes on a Tuesday. It is still less than 2. It comes on a Wednesday. It might be equal to. It's still not equal to. So even the LC is again not processed on the second day as well, and it actually falls back on the third day for processing. So first of all, I wanted to know is what's, I mean, I understand probably could be the reason that some bucket takes over days to process, and that could be the reason, but was there any other reason by putting 2 here?
Well, this this was designed to work in either the ordinary time scale or the debug interval. This just prevents lifecycle from continually re-entering in that case.
Re-entering, I still didn't get it. I mean, you're saying
I mean, if I mean, it's the same as in a regular timescale case, but if every 10 seconds we start off a life cycle, we don't want to be overrunning and doing it twice.
Maybe
The same.
maybe the ×2 should just apply to debug interval and not sex
Yes.
in a day.
Yep.
That
Exactly.
may be okay, as if and so that makes more sense from my point of view.
Cool. So that I'll then send a quick PR on this. At least so I understand this was only specifically for debug interval when the debug interval is set, right?
That was the intent. Yes.
So in still this case, and then can this be less than or equal to this? At least that's what I'm thinking.
I mean, I think the same scenario applies, but it's a lot less likely to be real. I don't, right? So if you guys are comfortable with that, I wouldn't object to changing that.
Yeah. And the second thing, this was the first thing that I was thinking about. The second thing is, right now our lock. This makes sense that this is a lock which has a timeout of 50 seconds. Actually, max, not this one. Actually, it says. I forgot.
I can imagine things we want to. I can imagine if you have a different suggestion for how to reliably take this lock, that would be fine, or to try harder.
Yes.
But again, this is electing this lock covers the LC shard, right? So
yes.
So we don't want to just hold it.
Yes, we don't want. Yes, so that this makes sense. So this is still, it says 50 seconds. So assuming if you're not processed within that 50 seconds or something, that's the default value 60. I forgot the name.
It's just going to try to do a Rados operation in that time, but as you say, if you've got a cluster that can't, it's worrisome if we can't, to be blunt, if we can't do the lock operation.
No, but the problem is if there is a slow OSD for some X reason. So this is all again boils down to, I mean, there could be a reason why one of the OSDs is slow.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying we don't change it, but I mean, it pains me slightly to imagine that scenario where this starts happening if it isn't if it's intermittent, if we don't have an explanation for that, that's likely to be a somewhat persistent problem.
No. So my follow-up, actually, I had another question. This was regarding again the lock timing itself. So this is this is the function process. So there are two functions: bucket process and process. One is when you call Rados admin, which gets processed, and this guy gets called automatically at time interval when the LC starts kicked in, right? So if you look at it, there's a different mechanism here. We only try to acquire lock for 8 seconds, which is 50. Like if you do not get that lock within like max retry, this is the win thing. Which we try 5 times, and if we do not get lock, we just leave it. So that bucket does not get processed, which is okay. But problem here is when we try to release this lock, you commented out, or probably, sorry, I'm trying to catch you, but this was the original logic, where in this you were infinitely trying to release the lock. Right now what happens is here lock, it again tries only 5 times to release the lock here. This is the code which sets whether it's failed or right.
So what do you propose there? We definitely don't want to try. Infinite retries is not a good idea. Right?
No, just this is for releasing. This is not for getting.
I know, but it's not desirable either. I don't think.
Because this is what this does. This entirely tries to keep on try to get the lock and then go and release it. Basically, that's what this guy does as well. Just complete, either set it to fail or complete, but at least it does more number of times at least as compared to what it sleeps for 5 seconds and then 5 minutes.
We could try harder, but I mean, but you don't want to do anything for an infinite delay, right?
This is only for setting here. That's what I was thinking. We could actually have this in. Yes, to acquire lock, it makes sense. We don't want to infinitely try to go and acquire lock, but in this case, we don't
want a thread spinning in here infinitely regardless. So I wouldn't dispute that you might want to do something different, but we don't want to do that.
So we are okay because of this guy. We are okay skipping the bucket for a day.
If these guys were convoying, then we could lose all of lifecycle and an RGW doing that. We don't want that.
Okay, so at least, but then we can at least go and increase. At least right now, it just says 50 milliseconds.
Yeah, you could adjust this reasonably, or if we come up with a different algorithm that you think does a better job of backup or much more robust. That would be a good idea.
Yes, that's what it is. Right now, this lock is just using 5 retries with the 50 milliseconds apart, and the chances are if the Rados is jammed at that point of time, within the 50 milliseconds, it might not release. And you would just skip setting the flag there and causing that lifecycle to not process on that bucket for the next day. So probably yes, I'll send in a couple of 2 commits here. One, try to make this more robust or have something and remove that 2 there from
Okay,
the
that's
expired
a good
session.
idea.
Yep, that's what I had. Probably, yeah. Try to get rid of this 2. Have this 2 only for when this guy is set. Make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm curious if we might find a design using CLS or something else that can make those operations atomic rather than requiring locks over the different operations, but that would be a separate thing.
Maybe it's just sort of it's sort of a hack. But if someone wants to design a stateful data structure, we could consider it.
Isn't this across RGW and then atomic won't work? That's the reason we have a lock here. If it was the same,
I mean, you could build an API where this was done with CLS.
okay,
I think
I see. Okay,
the data
Right,
structure is
so
maintained there.
atomic with respect to the OSD.
oh, with the respect to OSD. Okay, yeah.
I mean, so
Do-
you could
does-
move the operations into CLS operations and make an API for it, I suppose.
we don't have an API as of today, or we do have an API for atomic operations?
We have
CLS
an API. Well, there's specific things. I mean, all operations in a PG are effectively atomic. So you can build any number. So there are various data structures that use that for atomicity. One is the 2PC. Well, the various queues have that property. The CLS queue is an example of that. So you could have an API for managing the lifecycle states, and it could be, and it sounds like it could be more robust if we were willing to run it down there. Does that make sense? You would add an entry to a shard or remove one. You could have other rules that are checked there. So instead of being open coded up in the RGWs, it would be a CLS data structure and operations on it. CLS ADT.
Yeah, I think that might be tricky though, or because these are write operations and we'd have to rely on return vec where the entries are like bucket names. So I think we would hit return vec limits there.
Well, that's worth fixing, but I mean, if it does if that's the case, but I guess it does, because you end up having to otherwise seek through. If you want to do that, I mean, I think there's some prospect of improving that. I'd also like to see return back be more useful. So I wouldn't like to bake in never fixing that.
Yeah, it would unlock a lot of potential optimizations.
It's a nice property of Rados that we don't take full advantage of, and it makes nice. It would be. So I like this proposal. Maybe we can work on the return back dimension and then to consider it for future. I think relying on return back would be a nice way to do it.
Okay, and while we're on the subject of lifecycle, this had come out of Mark's performance call, but Akamai had done some experiments using coroutines for lifecycle processing, and I have kind of a updated PR with that design. It seems to be working and giving good improvements, so if people are interested in exploring that or helping with testing, I added a link to the Etherpad. Anything else for today, though? Good meeting. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.